I kind of like to do this. We're gathering some data and doing a lot more research on it. But at the beginning of these educational webinars, I like to ask everyone, have you or your firm or another firm that you personally know of suffered a ransomware attack? And just answer in the affirmative if you have. At the end of the webinar, I'll look at the numbers and give you a report on what we're seeing. We know what we normally see, but we'll see if it holds true every time. All right, so let's talk about the 5 steps and what you can do to stop cyber attacks, and especially ransomware. That's the number one problem. So you guys, I'm pretty sure most of you are subject to IRS 4557. I think there's about 5 parts to it. You've got to design, implement, and monitor a safeguard program. You've got to have a security officer, someone in charge of your security program. You've got to do a risk assessment, understand where your data is, what your security maturity is or your security awareness is of your organization. And then you've got to adjust your security posture, or as they say, the safeguard program, as needed on an ongoing basis. For example, you've got to pay careful attention to new technical threats, new threat actors, geopolitical dynamics, all sorts of other things, and the latest in defense technology. And finally, number 5, select appropriate service providers in line with compliance directives. What that means is this is not a do-it-yourself thing. The days of going to Best Buy and Office Depot and buying a McAfee or Norton Internet Security Suite are over with, as far as the IRS is concerned. We're seeing this trend across all industries that we service, and in fact, we're seeing the trends across all industries, period. For example, in the law business, they have the rules of professional conduct. I'm sure you guys have something very similar, or perhaps the same thing. And of course, lawyers for years, well, forever, have ethical obligations to protect their client data. And the rules of professional conduct says you've got to make reasonable efforts. And that's probably the way it's been worded for decades or longer, however long they've been there. Here's the problem. If an attorney, say in the state of New York, that's where this is, if an attorney suffers a breach and he gets a client's data compromised, that client initiates a civil suit against that attorney. And then that client brings in an InfoSec specialist like me. And his lawyer is not using a skilled security team. He's not using a class of product called an EDR, Endpoint Detect and Response. I will testify, I'll be forced to testify that that attorney did not do reasonable efforts. The game has changed tremendously. If you're just relying on antivirus to protect your firm, your company, your organization, that's not good enough, and it's not reasonable efforts, and it is quickly becoming a de facto statement or a de facto fact. And we're seeing it across all industries. And we're seeing it rapidly changing across all industry. And we're seeing it rapidly change just in cybersecurity insurance alone. So let's look at some intangible costs of a breach. I don't think I have to tell you guys that reputation is probably the most valuable asset your company has, you personally have. If I have a tax planner, an accountant, an attorney that suffers a data breach, I will leave if they were negligent, if they did not do reasonable efforts. And that's happening over and over again. There's also could be collateral losses and damages. You could have a third party get caught up in a security breach that introduces a lot of a lot more drama and variables into the problem you already have. Obviously, you're likely going to have operational disruption or destruction of data itself. Imagine having to reconstruct that, or loss of revenue because you can't run the business. We're starting to see banks increase the cost of borrowing if a customer of theirs has had a data breach, because they understand they're less likely to be able to repay the loan. For many contracts and agreements, that is a good way for a customer to get out of an agreement with you, so you could have a potential of lost contract revenue. It'll obviously devalue your trade name. It goes back to reputational damage. We're absolutely seeing insurance premium increases, certainly if you have a breach, but we're seeing it regardless, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in some upcoming slides. And like I've touched on a couple of times in here, it opens you up to civil claims. It opens you up to fines. I'm not sure if the IRS has fines for a violation of their 4557, but I know Sarbanes-Oxley may cover some of you. If you have medical records that get out for whatever reason, that's HIPAA, that's Office of Civil Rights violations, and there's all sorts of other financial implications that insurance may or may not make you whole. But I promise you it won't cover everything. You can't buy your reputation back. All right, let's talk about some myths around cybersecurity. Oh, and we're going to bust them. I've heard, and this one and many others, I've heard decades, IT professionals with decades of experience in extremely large Fortune 100 companies, all the way down to the smallest of companies, that have an IT staff or a IT manager or a CIO, whatever their title may be, or some of you may have, you outsource your IT to an MSP or a break-fix IT company. I've heard these words come out of their mouth. You may have been told this by your MSP. Says, "Oh, you're too small. You don't have to worry about this ransomware stuff or cyber attacks. Why would anybody want to attack your 3 or 5 person tax consultation firm? I mean, why would anybody do that? You're just too small." The vast majority of cyber attacks don't make the headlines at CNN or the New York Times or the Los Angeles Times. The are $5,000 ransomware, $10,000 ransomware. I already see that some of you answered yes to the question I posed early on, so you know what I'm talking about. That is by far the bulk of the revenue, the bulk of the ransom that's being paid to these criminals. And they're doing these attacks at scale with bots, automation. It's the criminal hacking industry, and that's not even getting into the other threat actors like nation states and terrorist groups and hacktivists and all of that. Just from a criminal hacker perspective, their industry is vertically specialized to scale. There are hackers that specialize in providing encryptions, clean encryption servers that aren't blacklisted. There's criminals that specialize in providing clean email servers that aren't blacklisted. There's criminal specialists that build ransomware attack software kits to be used by a ransomware attacker to construct their attack. It's point and click attack. They don't even have to write a line of code. If you take imagine the largest hospital, that you can think of, like MD Anderson, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo. Just picture that big, huge healthcare facility. Think about all the specialties in healthcare there are under that roof. Oncologists, hematologists, neurosurgeons, neurologists, registered nurses, practicing nurses, or whatever they're called. You just go on and on and on. Phlebotomist, you just go on and on and on. There's hundreds under the roof of a large hospital. There's at least that many specialties in the criminal hacking industry. I cannot communicate, and this is the first time you're hearing about the sheer scale of it. It is hard in a very brief minute or so to express how large this industry is, how specialized, how professional it is. They are sending out 100,000 emails to, let's say, for example, all of the certified public accountants in the state of California. They don't know. They don't even care how small you are. It's a shotgun attack. It's scatter. They think in terms of conversion rates on a ransomware attack, especially by email. They blast out 100,000 or 200,000 emails. Well, what's my, if my conversion rate is, let's say it's 200,000 emails, my conversion rate's 1%, and I average $10,000 a ransom. That's 2%. That'll be 1%. That'll be 2,000 victims paying an average ransom of $10,000. $20 million gross revenue for a week or two of work. It's a highly lucrative business. They don't know and they don't care who you are. Even when the whole thing's over with, they don't care and probably don't even know. It's a numbers game. It's done at scale. No such thing as too small.